The world is complex, the Bible is complex. Human existence is a tangled ball of experience, perception, and understanding. Ravel is a puzzling word, denoting both a tangling and untangling. This podcast attempts to hold honest conversations in good faith. Some ideas expressed in this podcast will be challenging. Others will be obvious. When a PhD in biblical interpretation and a habitually podcasting man-child discuss matters of society, scripture, and scandal, you get Ravel.
Hey everybody, you are listening to Ravel and Razzle Dazzle. I'm your best buddy Basil. And with me, as always, the decisive, the dedicated, and the dynamic Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates in the house. What's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up? You are getting better at your intros there. For me, I mean,
Thanks.
I hate that I even ask you to do it, but I just feel like it's so much better when you do than if I introduce myself boringly.
You mean just
hi.
generally start talking at the beginning of a podcast?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Just-
Well, I've had lots of practice. Just sort of beginning talking with no aim in mind is one of my core skills. It's not very marketable of a skill, but you know what? In this world, we have to make our own way. But anyways, we do have an interesting episode today with
quite
unusual. It's an unusual episode. Am I describing this correctly?
I would say so. Something I don't think that either one of us were expecting for a variety of reasons. But we had the opportunity to have on Matthew Miller, who you guys might remember from just only a few episodes ago in our Death of God series, and he came on and talked about the idea of the death of God in film and media. And he and I had kind of, we stayed in touch after that first interview, and it actually kind
You
of
guys
developed.
became best buddies.
In a
You got
strange
to use the
way.
correct terminology. You're best buddies now.
In a strange way, we did. We had a lot of things in common. Had couple of quite extensive conversations, and stayed in touch with each other through text messaging and things like that. And then I'm laying there in bed one night working on, I don't know, I was grading or doing something, and I get a text from him. And I had put out a post some time ago on Instagram, and some of you all might remember seeing that, about the fact that he was going in for some brain surgery, to have a tumor removed, and he went in for that, and he told me he was going in, and I was, kind of nervous for him, but, later on that same day, everything's okay, I'm good, came out, lost a little feeling in my right hand or something like that, or vision, he said, but, all is well. So I thought, well, great. And then this was a couple days later. Now I'm laying, in my bed and grading, and I get a text from him, and he says, he said, I just got back from the doctor, and they said that they didn't get to the tumor fast enough, and it's spreading, and it's terminal. And he said, I think at that time they gave him like 12 to 18 months to live. And it was very strange. It was a very strange sort of sensation because, I've never even met the guy. We've spent a lot of time talking and texting and things like that, but my heart like sank, and I was just laying there, and I just kind of started crying thinking about it, because he's told me about his family. He's got 4 kids and a wife, and just a great guy. And it was just really tough. And my wife walks in, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Matt just told me he's gonna die." And it was just really weird. And have kind of been trying to kind of, process that whole thing. And, he's only 44 years old. So it's, I'm not too far from that age myself. It's a very strange sort of thing. But he had asked, he has a lot of followers over there on his YouTube channel, a lot of people following his work, and he posted a little bit about it. But he kind of wanted to give his whole story, like kind of tell the whole thing, something that's kind of hard to do just in, a Facebook post or something. So he asked if he could use the podcast to come on kind of as, a platform to share that story with people. So he can just, when people are asking him, he can say, hey, let's just go check out this show and you'll find out about it. So we couldn't deny a dying man a wish, and not that we would want to anyway, but we were thrilled to have him on. In this episode today, we just kind of give him the floor to talk about some of the things that God's been teaching him in the midst of all of this, and some of the things that were happening leading up to it. And he kind of gets into, how all of that has been changing and how he's starting to see a bunch of these pieces kind of falling into place. So pretty interesting and unexpected conversation that we have for you here today.
Yeah, and a very unique one. I mean, a very unique opportunity we have. It's not every day that somebody is faced with this kind of challenge. And so, I think we kind of consider this conversation a bit of an addendum to the Death of God series, but it is also much more than that. And an interesting perspective that we don't usually get. Somebody in this type of life situation who just, at least for me, I had not talked to Matthew since September when we had first recorded his episode. And, for me, the difference between September and now is basically just a couple of rent payments and some panicking about the holidays. Whereas for Matthew, I mean, it's an entirely different perspective on life now.
Yeah.
So Matthew shares a bit with us about a little bit more about his life that I did not know, which casts some interesting light on our previous conversations. And we talk about he's gotten some more perspective on the Death of God idea. Especially, facing the challenges that he's facing. We learn a little bit about his life, like I mentioned, and then we sort of look forward, not just for, his remaining time. Of course, we are fervently praying and believing that if God wants to change his situation, of course, he can and will.
Amen.
But it's also looking forward for the rest of us and how we see our lives and see our time here on earth as well. So try to keep up if you can. It moves quite a bit. But just know as you're going through the conversation that it all comes full circle at the end and is very rewarding. So I believe in you guys. And anything else to say, Chris?
Yeah, just to echo that, he is, as I've gotten to know him a little better here, he is one of those guys who just has his mind is capable of kind of processing large swaths of information all at once. And the way that you said it was kind of perfect. It reminded me of, I think, my second semester in my PhD program. And we asked one of our professors this question. I think it had to do with the canonization of the Old Testament, if I remember correctly. And he started off answering the question. And then somewhere 30 minutes into his answer, we're all just sitting there. It might not have been that long, at least 15 minutes into the answer. I'm like, does he even remember the question that we asked him a moment ago? But then sure enough, he brings it all the way back around. And then he says, and that's how the Old Testament was canonized. And you realized all of these little extra details along the way were playing in. And Matt, he has that same kind of mind, and as I've talked to him, it's there's a lot going on in his brain, and if you can hang in there, you see how how it all kind of comes together. I think it happens at least 3 times, I think, in this conversation. So yes, hang in there. It's really a beautiful story.
Stick with it. All shall be revealed. Here we have Matthew Miller. You're back Sooner than we expected, but we're so happy to have you here. But there's been a lot going on, man, and we wanted to have a chance to talk with you about it. So thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, life hits at you fast, right? I think I guys met you guys. I think maybe 2 months ago, maybe a little bit less. Was on the first podcast back in September, and in between, I came down with a tumor that's terminal. And the doctors say I have 15 months to live. So life comes at you fast.
Laying it out.
Just mentions it so casually.
Yeah.
So wait, just to give this the gravity that it deserves.
Okay.
To let everybody know, you had a tumor in your brain, had it removed. They biopsied it, found out that it had spread, the cancer had spread, and that it is terminal. And what you are telling all of us is that the doctors are telling you you will be dead in 15 months.
Yes.
Okay. You kind of just mentioned it, just, in passing.
Yeah.
So this is no light thing to be talking about here.
Right. Well, yeah,
So
there's gravity to it, and I'm just kind of like, it's just part of my life now. So I get your listeners like, wait, this guy was just on the last episode, now he's dying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Life hits you fast. Catch up.
I mean, the matter of factness, I think, is what might be catching Chris a little off guard.
Startling, yeah.
Yes. But now I have a question, and then I kind of want to let you roll with it a little bit.
Sure.
When you say we last spoke to you in September. Was this something that developed over the 2 months, or had it been developing, or what's the? Do you have any details on that, or is it just too hard to say?
I actually don't know how long it's been in my head. They suggested when I found it, it might have been there upwards of a decade.
Whoa!
But then they, want to know how fast it grew. I don't know if there was any. It's a what do you call it? A glioma, something like that. It's growing fast, but it's this is what when people die of brain cancer, this is what people get typically. It's very common, so it's not like an unusual thing, but it's irreversible. So while they removed about 70-80% of it in an emergency surgery the night they found it, or the day after they found it. They weren't able to get all of it, and it won't be it's irreversible. So they'll be able to maybe slow it down. Timeline, depending on chemo, radiation, all that kind of stuff, might be able to stretch out. They were talking upwards of 2 years, but I didn't have the right genetic mutation for complete effectiveness with the chemo. So 15 months sounds about right. They didn't really move it beyond that much. So I'm at peace with that, and I can tell you why I'm at peace with this whole thing and why I could be matter of fact about it. But
yes, please.
Yeah, that's the miracle of this whole thing. The thing you didn't think about, the thing you don't typically think about when you know you're going to die. God did some stuff in this whole thing which was pretty extraordinary, and it's all wrapped up to a long story that goes back to the origins of Logos Made Flesh, the channel that I have, the YouTube channel, and why you guys originally had me on your show. You met with Chuck and Omar, and they said, "Hey, you got to talk to this guy who knows the Gospel of Mark," that kind of stuff. And Chuck and Omar were like, man, they were the guys that I did my first videos, and they were the first podcast that ever said, "Hey, would you come on our podcast?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And so they've been with me every step of the way. So I just want to give a shout out to those guys at Fire Theft Radio. They're really cool guys.
Yeah, and we love those guys too.
Yeah. So anyway, I just want to say thank you to them for believing in a guy who just started a YouTube channel, and it was very early on when that happened, about 2007. No,
oh, wow.
Maybe. Whoa, let's see here, 2015, 2000. Yeah, it's probably around 2015 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
That's incredible. Yeah, I've known the Fire Theft Radio guys for a while, ever since they contacted us about one of my other podcasts.
Yeah, they were walking in your footsteps. I remember that. They were like, "Have you heard Canary cry before?" And I'm like, "Nope."
Wow, those guys are doing a lot of great stuff. I love that. So wow, this is an interesting full circle experience for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a quick question. How did you even know to go to the doctor? Was this a routine checkup thing, or were you having some symptoms unexplained? What tipped you off that you needed to get your head looked at?
Well, I woke up with a headache at 8 o'clock at night, or basically went through the night. It was a migraine. It was an unusual migraine. Well, you have to actually know what happened that day, which is pretty cool. I was planning on going the next day, and I'd contacted a criminal defense attorney to basically turn over some documents. For the past 6 years, I've been working at the Clark County Sheriff's Office, and I needed some information about whether something was legal, not illegal, legal, or something like that about what they had done. And I have a stack of paperwork that basically says their credibility is shot through to the core. And this is a long story. There's other stuff to it, but I didn't want to hire an attorney because attorneys are expensive and they're worth it. I'm not going to say that they're not. They do the legwork. There's lots of legal questions, lots of research that needs to be done. But I didn't want to spend the money to do it. But I thought, who would be interested in the credibility of the Clark County Sheriff's Office and the stacks of paperwork that I have, because I have some questions about what has taken place. I got fired basically a month ago from my job for the second time, and just again, this is a long story. It goes back again to the origins of Logos made flesh. But I called up a criminal defense attorney. Would you be interested in the documents that I had? And he said, "Oh, I'd be very interested." And so, can you meet with me tomorrow? Can you bring the documents? I said, "Absolutely." So that night I went to bed and I woke up with a headache, and I went to the doctor and they said, "You have a tumor." And I never met with them. I woke up, actually went to sleep, and I went into REM, rapid eye movement, and every time my eyes moved back and forth between my left and right side, it felt as if I was being punched in the face. So in my dream state, I'm feeling like I'm being punched in the face, and I come out of that breathing kind of heavy, and then I would go back to sleep. My wife would say, just relax, go to sleep. And I said, I can sleep. I'm going right back to sleep. But every time I went to sleep, I'd feel like I was being punched in the face. So this goes on, discomfort. My dad comes down with some migraine medication that he has because he suffers from migraines. Again, this was not like his migraines. It was nothing like that. He said, but you have a migraine, came down with it, and I tossed the whole thing up. So I can't even keep pain medication now, very, very much pain. And finally I say to my wife, I think I need to go to the hospital. It's not getting better. This is unusual. And I pulled out of bed, stumbled out, but not confusion, but it was more pain. And I put 2 different shoes on, my pants are on backwards, and I'm out the door, and my wife drives me to the ER. And at the ER, they discovered that they did the CT scan, and they found that I had the tumor. And I was moved the next day to another hospital, and the doctor said, well, we got to take it out, sign on the dotted line. You may not wake up. You might have paralysis on your left side. You might have memory loss. You might not be who you are when you go to sleep. My wife saw me going into this elevator, and she saw that I was scared because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be the same person when I come out. So they put me down for 6 hours. I mean, my wife was on pins and needles. For me, it was asleep. And but after the 6 hours, I woke up. I felt my left side. I squeezed my hand and realized that my memories were all there, and I was still the same person that went down. I was still the same. It was still me. And I was like,
that's a relief.
Yeah. So it's like, wow. So I came out. I'm alive still. That felt good. And so at that point, though, by that time, I already knew that God was in this. And I haven't told you the whole story yet. But partly the fact that I did feel God was saying, don't do this, in the fact that he gave me the tumor the night before I was going to turn over those documents, which I didn't feel bad about. I mean, I'm completely justified in doing, but I felt God had something more in store. He was saying, no, I don't want you to do that. I have something else I want you to do. Just in all these things, I was thinking, yeah, okay. So I felt like God was in this in a way, a deeper way. And again, you have to hear the whole story again, going back to, and do you mind if I share with that I've done another podcast? So if there's any details that I leave out, because we're going to try and do a shorter, much truncated version today of this story. It's very long.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
My friend of mine who just sat down with the other day, and I sat in his living room. It's very calm. It's very zen. It was very nice. And we went over this story, and it takes about a 3-hour story, and there's more to it than this. So if we don't go over anything today, please check out Cause I Want to Know. But with Tony Myers, he sat down and talked with me about my full experience. And if there's anything I miss out, you can check it out there. Mm-hmm. But and again, if anybody comes there, please. I really want to stick with Ravel because I want to tell you this podcast is fantastic. Basil and Chris, you guys are amazing. And Chris, I feel like a brother to you. In the last month, I mean, we just met each other, and it's like, wow, we're kindred spirits. And there's a thing from Anna Green Gables. I think most guys haven't read Anna Green Gables, but
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll throw it in. I'll probably have covered it already in the pre-show before this gets here. But yeah, we have been reached out to you to come on the first time, and that quick, what I thought was going to be about a 10 or 15 minute scheduling phone call turned into about 2.5 hours, and since then, Matt and I have kept in touch, and even have some plans to spend some time together. He's out on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, and had been thinking about that even before this diagnosis. But I mean, you have become a good friend of the show, for one. We certainly, as soon as we had you on and got incredible feedback from that episode, we knew we would want to have you on again. And then, even more so, have just been a dear friend to me here for these last few months. So this whole thing is very bizarre and strange to me, and I'm still kind of trying to process it. You and I had talked a little bit yesterday in preparation for this today, and I was telling you I just can't even, doesn't even make any sense to me right now. But yes, we appreciate your support, and being a fan and a supporter of what we're doing here, and of course we are huge fans of your work too. So it's mutual. Appreciate you. Glad to have you here.
Well, I'll say this, with the last episode, when you guys had me coming on to talk about the death of God, I think it was the first or second episode you were doing on the series.
Second one, yeah.
And I would say that the reason I was comforted and so comforted in this whole situation was and I'm hoping this is everyone's experience. And I felt kind of like this surreal thing when they told me I was terminal, and they said all these things were coming to an end and my life is coming to a close. That in the 2 previous months, basically 3 months leading up to this time, that I really have felt the pieces falling into place. Now, not just the pieces were all throughout, basically since 2014, when I started Logos Made Flesh and everything like that, but it was as if the pieces were falling into place, saying God's packing the bags, putting the pieces together. And that Ravel, being on the first Ravel podcast, that was one of those pieces that was coming into place. It was just like, it was like one that this was supposed to happen, and now, okay, your bags are packed. Now you're ready to go. Here you go. So that when the news...
In what way, if you don't mind kind of expounding on that, what was the connection, or what was the Lord doing through that episode as far as you were concerned from your perspective?
I think, well, for one thing, I mean, when we started talking about the death of God, for one, you contacted me about Ex Machina. Let's just say this. You contacted me about Ex Machina, which is a rather... I had a lot of pain in making that video, and I wanted to make that video because I wanted to show people that I didn't just say things that I simply see Jesus and toast kind of thing. I don't simply say things to evangelize or to try to get people to see. I really want to know what the author had in mind, and even if it's dark and seedy and also goes against my belief, runs counter to my belief, that I'm presenting that as well. So it was kind of one of those videos that I did because I wanted to challenge myself and also challenge my viewers, saying, no, if anybody thinks that I'm simply saying things that I'm seeing what I want to believe, basically. I basically said, no, I don't see what I want to believe. I see things that I don't want to believe, and I'll say those things too. So honesty, integrity, and but even the point of contention with my own beliefs is important to me. I think credibility matters, and I think that it's important that we just don't go off in the world of our imagination and say that the world acts according to every way that I want it to be. And in that sense, I think Ex Machina was a good video to do because it is disconcerting. It is about the death of God. It is about the thing that you don't want to wrestle with. I mean, it has some dark. It's about evolution. It's about creation through destruction, and that God is not necessarily a good figure or character in this story, and that his death might be a good thing. That's way beyond what I want to do. But anyway, just talking to you about the movie and the film. Just got me thinking about some of the issues in the movie. Now, Alex Garland followed up Ex Machina with the movie Annihilation. And I hadn't really thought about Annihilation before our conversation. It hadn't been on my radar. I saw it and I thought, well, that's interesting. I mean, it wasn't something that I wanted to think about. I didn't see anything. I didn't see any depth of meaning that like I saw in Ex Machina. But after we talked, and I think we started sharing with you, Chris, I went back and I watched it. I'm like, I'm going to go back and check out that, because some of his other films, Sunshine, another previous film, and what was the other film he did? Well, let's just say Sunshine, Annihilation, and Ex Machina. They're all about the death of God. And so when we talked about that theme, you go back and you look at these three films together, and they're doing something very similar. All three of those films are doing something very similar in thematic sense. Nietzsche talked about the madman coming through and the lantern got put out, and he's talking about the sun and how the sun went out. Well, Sunshine's about the sun going out. And Ex Machina is about the death of God, because you have Nathan, who's the figure of God, and Ava killing him. So this theme runs through Alex Garland's, at least those three films. So I thought, well, what about Annihilation? Because Annihilation is a little bit different than Ex Machina, but it's about this thing called the shimmer that comes. It's like an alien thing that comes and hits a lighthouse, and it grows. And inside this kind of weird alien type thing, let's say it's kind of like this oily type substance. It's weird. There is this world, and if anything goes into it, isn't coming back out. So there's this kind of like what's going on behind this shimmer. And inside this world of the shimmer, when they actually go inside the shimmer, there is something that's taking place where copies are being made of copies and DNA is being distorted. They kind of compare it to cancer. Like something's happening here, destruction is taking place, but actually at the same time that destruction is taking place, this creation is taking place. And I think Natalie Portman's character says something like, "It's making things new." It almost has this idea of the end of the world. It has this idea of revelation. It has this idea of, but it doesn't come. It's almost biblical, you'd say, but it's. I don't know. There's these themes that are coming. So he's like, is he trying to be spiritual about it? Is he trying to be non-spiritual? Because obviously he's an atheist. He's doing something different. Anyway, so there's all these different things that are going on. Anyway, so I start looking at this film. And I start thinking about Ex Machina, which is about Ava, who's Eve. Eve, the play on the word. And then there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That basically what you're supposed to see in Ex Machina is Eve, in some sense, overthrowing the Creator, and then killing the Creator because through this death of God thing. Boy, there's just so many themes. I haven't thought about this for a month, but I'm just trying to. So my mind is on fire with all these things. Chris and I talked about. You guys plucked a string, and now I'm starting to go through the web. I'm going, okay, now it's just like everything's going off in my head. And I kept telling people, I said, my mind is on fire. Like I kept texting you, Chris. I'm like, I'm talking about these things to other people. I'm looking at visuals and images. And it wasn't painful or anything like that, but I was just, the dominoes were falling. Sometimes you push on something and nothing falls, but sometimes you push on something and then everything falls and you're like, wow, that was cool. So a cascading of ideas and thoughts started flooding in my head. And I'm like, I got to share this with you guys. I really wanted to come back on the show immediately because I'm like going, I got more to say about the death of God. This is amazing.
Yeah.
This is amazing. So what was interesting, I saw in Annihilation, I'm watching it and I didn't get it, and I don't think most people did get it. They were watching it. I watched a couple videos on it afterwards, with Natalie Portman, and she started talking about echoes. She said, "What's the key to this movie?" She goes, "Well, just the echoes." Now, at one part in the movie, opening of the movie, she's sitting down with at the very beginning when the guy's asking her about what happened inside the shimmer, and she says something about the echoes. And what I realized was this is another movie. It's the never-ending story retold. That the shimmer is the nothing. And if you guys know the never-ending story, some people don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Chris, you said it's like one of your favorite
movies as a kid. Yeah, I loved that one. I watched it 100 times as a kid.
Yeah. And it kind of, depends on where you hit, like our age. It hit me, I saw it in kindergarten at Minnehaha Elementary School. But and I watched it on HBO and everything like that, watched reruns, and it just stuck with me for the years, and I've always liked it. But people who are slightly older than us, they never saw it because they're maybe their younger siblings saw it, and it wasn't like Star Wars where everyone saw it. You had to be a certain age to have seen it. But if you were right at that age to see it, it had a pretty big impact, especially when you see Artax, drowning in the.
When he dies, come on.
Yeah,
that was just cruel.
It is cruel, Artax.
Unfair.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a tough film to watch, and it's but the kid who goes up in the library and reads a book, I imagined about that. I was like, that's so cool, man, to get lost in a book in the middle of school and then sleep over at your school. And that would, just that kind of gave me chills. Like that'd be awesome. And it almost looked like Minnehaha Elementary School when I saw it. It was like the same stairs and everything like that. I mean, that was filmed in Vancouver, British Columbia, which isn't too far from where I live. So it's about 500 miles north of here. So it's kind of the same world. At least that elementary school was. So anyway, but seeing all that, it seemed to me that was the key that would unlock what Alex Garland was saying about the shimmer. And if you watch, so there's a lot of questions in the film at the end of Annihilation. There's kind of again a kind of doppelganger mirror creature that the main character has to confront, almost in the way that there's a mirror image of Ava. How Caleb and Ava mirror each other. There's this idea of mirror images of each other, which is kind of like Adam and Eve. And anyway, you got to watch my video. It's way too much. I don't want to get into this. I'm going off on the deep end on this. But if you think of the death of God as a thing which brings about nihilism and nothingness and despair, then you can see in Alex Garland's next film, The Shimmer, the nothing manifested in the never-ending story. And he's suggesting that somehow the death of the author is leading to the death of meaning and purpose and the death of hope. And I think that, that really is great when you see the character Gmork, who basically embodies the nothing, embodies the death of God, embodies the fact that men and women are losing their hopes and their dreams. It's like a despair, he says, tearing our world apart. And I have come as a servant of the nothing. And he says, I'm looking for Atreyu. And he says, well, and he goes, come for me. And Atreyu says, well, I'm Atreyu. Come for me, Gmork. If I'd rather die fighting than to just come and take me. If we're going to die, I'd rather die fighting. And then Gmork goes, and he jumps on Atreyu, and Atreyu stabs him. And that's, so anyway, just this long kind of convoluted way to get from the death of God all the way into a children's story called The Never-Ending Story. But there is that route there. There's these themes that are playing through these films, and it does explain Annihilation, and I'm just not going to go into it. But another thing about Annihilation was the thing that, and this is in The Never-Ending Story too, is that the thing which is bringing destruction is also bringing new birth, a new creation. That there is this idea that there is, in the destruction, there is new life. So The Never-Ending Story has a central motif, and it's called the Ouroboros. It's actually called the Aron in The Never-Ending Story, but it's an ancient symbol, and in fact, it appears in Annihilation as a tattoo on Natalie Portman's character's arm, which is the serpent eating its own tail. And so I started thinking about that too. What does the Ouroboros mean, and how is it in concert, and how does it work in The Never-Ending Story? How does it work elsewhere? At the same time, I'm thinking of all these things about creation and destruction and creation, and how the serpent's eating its own tail, which are just random thoughts, just blowing through my head, and dominoes are falling. My wife and I decided we're going to leave our church that we've been at, or at least just go to a different church because my kids had kind of gravitated over there. And we sit down, and they're a very expository church, very much expository. And they sat me down, or they sat us all down, and we're going through the book of Judges. And every time I sit down and I'm a very bad listener, but if you tell me to look at the Bible when people are preaching, I read the Bible when people are preaching.
Yeah.
So I'll read it, and I'll look at
good job.
it.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, but it gives me the time to do it, because I just wouldn't just pick up Judges, but we're in there and we're looking at Judges. So there I am looking at the text. Even if the pastor's not necessarily talking about the thing I'm looking at the text, reading it through. He said something, I'm reading a few passages later. And one thing about Judges that I've known for a very long time is that there's a cycle of subjugation, men domineering women, women domineering men. But that comes from it's a kind of a riff on Genesis 3, where basically you have the when the curse happens. If you watch my video on Mad Max Fury Road, it's very easy to describe. Basically, women are cursed to war with men. And men are cursed to war with the ground. I'm sorry. Women are cursed to war with the serpents, and then women are cursed. I'm sorry. I'm butchering it. But the fact is that the serpent is put at war with the women. Women are put at war with men. Men are put at war with the ground until they return to dust, until they're eaten by the serpent in death, because the serpent is condemned to eat the dust.
Eats the dust. Yeah.
So it's this idea of a cycle. It's not linear. So if you read the first curse and the second curse and the third curse, what it does is it kind of does this loop, so that it all goes down, and then that the person that's at the bottom, which is the serpent, now eating the dust and death, well, now man is condemned to die and become dust, where he's eaten by the eater of the dust, which is the serpent. In essence, nobody's in charge. Before there was dominion, before there was rulership, before there was headship, and now everything's twisted, and now nobody's in charge, and the whole world is basically condemned to this utter chaos, where you're just, blowing through everything, and nobody's in charge, and everybody's in despair and hurt, and that's the way it goes. But Judges does the same thing. If you read the book of Judges, there's a cycle of subjugation. People do things. There's, judge comes up, they get free, and then the people go right back into it, and they go back into this chaos where they're being, defeated by their enemies again, and then it does it again, and we keep doing it again over and over and over again. So there's kind of this allusion to Genesis in that respect, and particularly because Judges, and the interesting thing is, like Samson, the story of Samson's just one story in it, but in almost every story of the Judges, there's a woman who somehow is domineering or ruling over a man, where the man should be ruling. Women are kind of, playing this guy like a fiddle, or they're doing something, like, Barak and Deborah, and you have the story of Samson and Delilah, and you have the story of Gideon, who, the person, I think it was Gideon, I can't remember where he's a king, and it's a woman that slides off the tile and kills the guy in the end, and he says, "Kill me because I don't want to be killed by a woman." So this idea of women and men is found in Genesis 3, but it finds a manifest expression of narrative form in this book of Judges. I'm sorry, I'm probably going too far on this.
No, this is great. I'm curious here.
We're with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're reading the story of Samson in this church service, and there's the story of the riddle. Basically, Samson is chosen by God. He's gifted by God. He's a Nazarite from birth, and he's got this great strength, and he's going to do great things. We know it from the beginning, and yet when he is born and grows up, he's not the coolest character. I mean, he's doing stuff he shouldn't be doing. So
really bad guy.
What was that?
I said he's a really bad guy, actually.
Yeah. So in Judges 14, it says that he wanted to go marry a Philistine woman, which he's not supposed to do in the Bible. You're not supposed to marry outside your people. And his parents are disconcerted by it. They say, well, that's not right. And Judges, well, I'll tell you what Judges 14 says in just a minute. But the fact is, he goes down to marry this woman, and on his way to go marry this woman, he's confronted by a lion. And the lion comes out to attack him. He grabs the lion, breaks its neck, and then he moves on, and he comes back and he sees the lion, the carcass, which he's not supposed to touch, has honey in it. A beehive is taken up, and he's got some honey in it. So he goes to and he scrapes out some of the honey, which he's not supposed to do because he's touching a dead body, gets the honey, and he goes on to the wedding, again, with the woman he's not supposed to marry and not do what he's supposed to do. And he gets there and he says, "Hey, I got a riddle for you. I give you this riddle. You take the riddle, and if you can give me this riddle out, you owe me this, and I'll give you that." So basically, it's kind of a bet. You figure out the riddle, and you'll win, and I'll win, or I'll lose, or I'm not going to describe it. Anyway, so the fact is that he says this, and here's the riddle he gives about the thing that just happened, about what the Bible just described. He says, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." Mm-hmm. And I've read that for years, well, not years and years, but I've thought about that, and I said, well, that's a terrible riddle. Because the things how riddles work, and I've thought about this again more about this, but the way that riddles works is riddles are puns, riddles are wordplay, riddles are something which you, not knowing my experience, can figure out by your own experience because you know the wordplay that's going on in the riddle.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
They're not, the question isn't, what did you do, so if I say, what did I have for breakfast last Tuesday, is not a riddle. It's a question. And you have nothing in your experience to know what that. So in essence, it's a clue. It's a code. A riddle is a code, and if you don't have anything experience to break that code because you don't know my experience, it's not really a code. It's just a question, and you're just left in the dark. It's like when Bilbo finds the ring in his pocket, and he says, "What's in my pocket?" to Gollum. Well, that's not a riddle. It's a question, but Gollum takes it as a riddle, and he's very frustrated by it because he just gets mad and he goes wandering off. It's not a riddle. So when the Bible tells you what the key to the riddle is, which is the story of Samson breaking the lion's neck and then taking the honey from it, and then calls it a riddle, even though they just told you where it came from, it's calling attention to the actions or details in the story as a riddle and wanting you to see it as a wordplay, wanting you to see some further layer of meaning to it than just simply what just transpired. It's not about the lion. It's not about the honey. There's something more to it than that. And it's saying, I want you to meditate on it in a deeper way. So I'm thinking about this, thinking, okay, so what it might be further being revealed. And I talked to my wife. I just said, she's the one that saw it. She said, you know what? The way that Samson reaches in and scrapes out that honey from its belly, she said, and it says, and then he gave to his parents also, and they did not know where it came from. That's exactly what Eve does when she grabs the fruit and gives to her husband the fruit also. So we're not just supposed to see what Samson is doing here. We're supposed to see a reference to the fall. And so the statement, the riddle, has something to do more than just with what Samson did, and it's saying something about the fall. That's the perception here. So here's the riddle again. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. Now, when you look at those words, and I started doing a little concordance work just real quick, just going, okay, what's the play on words here? There's something going on here. Well, an eater, it's the thing that which consumes. It's the destroyer. It's the thing that you could just say is the evil. It's the thing which is bringing about death. And it's the consumer. The strong has the same connotations. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the word strong has the same connotations in Hebrew of not just a person who's strong, because we think, well, Samson's strong. Well, a lion's strong, yeah. But the idea of strength is an idea of a devourer. It's an idea of so it has the same. So this is a parallel expression. Eater, strong. They have the same meaning essentially. But then out of the eater came something to eat. So what does it mean to eat? Well, it means something which is life sustaining. You eat in order to sustain life. So what's supposed to be consuming you now becomes the source of life by which you are consuming it. That in some sense there's this divine exchange, or this irony in it, that the thing which is supposed to bring about death is actually bringing about life. And that so, and then it says, out of the strong came something sweet, and that sweet is the idea of, again, something that's good, beneficial, that kind of stuff. So if we transfer that and say, well, this is not just about the lion, it's not just about the fall. I'm not about the lion, but Samson's story, but it's about the fall. You go, what's it saying about that? Is it saying that this was evil and always will be evil, and it's bad and will always be bad? Or is it saying that in the fall, that God was actually doing something good? So what happens in Judges 14, here's the thing, what happens in Judges 14 at the very beginning, when Samson is not supposed to go marry this woman, again, the Bible says this is not the right thing to do. It's very clear, don't marry outside of your people, and his parents are concerned. But in Judges 14, it says that his parents said, why are you going to do this? And it says this, the Bible actually says this, and they did not know that it was from the Lord, for the Lord was in it. He was looking for an occasion to confront or pick a fight with the Philistines. That meaning that what he wasn't supposed to do was from the Lord, because he had a bigger plan in mind. And that the thing that they were clearly told not to do was from the Lord, because he had even a bigger perspective. That the thing which was evil, the thing which was wrong, that could even be undone because God was overriding that to do his own purposes, that there was something even more than that. And this is very, we read Pharaoh and how God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and we go, how can, about free will and all these kind of things. But there's definitely an aspect of the Bible which is saying, hey, God's even in control and in charge of the evil in this world.
Yeah.
And that he's doing something good through it, and that you can trust him to be good even when you don't understand it. Am I going too far? What do you think, Chris?
No.
Bible professor that you are.
I can see where this is going too. I'm pretty sure that you and I had talked about it, but as soon as you brought up Samson, I was like, oh yes. But you did not go this in depth when we had spoken about it. So no, yes, please bring it to its conclusion, because I think heads will probably pop everywhere when you get to the end here where this is going. But yeah, no, this is great. I'm loving it.
Okay. I guess I've gone way too out expounding the scriptures. All I'm saying is that when I heard that, I said, and then thinking about the never-ending story, thinking about annihilation, and thinking about the Ouroboros. So this is an ancient symbol of a snake eating its own tail, a serpent eating its own tail. and in Annihilation and Never-Ending Story, both those ideas is that the nothing is also bringing about creation and actually wiping itself out. That basically, that there's a new restoration, a new creation that's happening in this situation where it looks like everything's going to perish, and actually it's bringing about a new creation. So in the story of the fall, it's the story of the serpent. Serpent comes and wants to tempt them to do something. And I think that in essence, I think the scripture is actually saying through Judges, that what the serpent did was eat its own tail. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. That in that situation, that it brought about salvation for all and actually just wiped itself out. I mean, it's not like it just was an instant, but in essence, it defeated itself. And brought about what God had planned and had in mind all along. And that we can even trust God to be good and still be good in the fact that the world is fallen. And that we don't have to fear the fall. And that it's not something that, and I think this is what, not the New Testament, but the Old Testament is saying, that even in this stuff, even in the destruction, even in the scary stuff, that we're not just waiting for Jesus, and we did wait for Jesus, and it did come about, even in a greater way, but that this world is still good, even with all the shit that's going on. And that we might curse it all we want to and say, oh, that's terrible, that happened, and it's ugly, and I don't want it to happen. And yet, at the same time, and again, the problem of evil, I believe, is a hermeneutic problem. And this is how I've come with Arrival and Memento, my videos, in Castaway particularly, which I've been trying to work on and try to deal with the problem of evil, is that everything can be resolved. All evil can be resolved in time. Because most of the evil that we see is usually just a temporary thing. We think that in the moment it's bad. But all things can be reconciled if God is the father of time, the author of time. All things that look evil to us and we don't like, God can just turn it around for good. And you get to the end of the story and you're like, well, that's what had to happen. What a beautiful thing that happened. But in the moment you're like, oh, that's terrible. I can't imagine that happening. But yet you get to the end and you're like, wow, that was awesome. And yet you don't see it in the moment. But if this is why Chris and I, we talked about the sovereignty of God, and I don't come from a Reformed background. I come from a Pentecostal background that's very Arminian and very free will oriented. So as I've told people this, that God was in my tumor, and I felt he was in my tumor, and I can give you the details of my story, my full story. They were like, well, what do you do with free will? What do you do with Satan? I'm like, I don't know. But I know that God is good, and he showed me to be good, and I can trust him even all the stuff that's going on. Because he showed himself to be good. I'm going to tell you my story, my full story. But I mean, it works out, and it kind of resolves itself. And when I saw how it resolved itself, I was like, no way. No way.
Before you get into this, I was surprised that you didn't bring us to the conclusion of the Samson story, because that is, you were perhaps going there and then maybe just got sidetracked. But it is Samson. I mean, the conclusion of that story is he is brought into the presence of all of his enemies, where he in a very in a manner that really is typologically prophetic of Jesus.
Yes.
Gives his own life, through his death. That is what brings about the victory of God in that situation. So, you're gonna get me to go down that. You're gonna get me to go down that trail, because I've started going down that. Like, man, I mean, so how do they try to take Samson's? I just started looking at John. There's lots of stuff. I'm a John guy, you know it. Yeah.
But there's lots of stuff in John, and the allusions and to Samson's story in Christ's story are pretty pronounced. The fact is that they try to take, the first thing Samson says, how do we get you to take away your strength, Samson? One of the things was that they tried to weave a loom into his hair to take away his strength. Now, I'm not going to say this is the reason Jesus wears a crown of thorns in the New Testament. I think he did wear a crown of thorns, but I think the New Testament writers understood that it says that it was a twisted crown of thorns that they put upon his head. And there's some allusions to the Samson story and the fact that, they're trying to bind him. That's the fact, is that they're trying to bind his body so he doesn't rise from the dead. So there's these allusions to the Samson and what Christ does, and the fact that he does rise from the dead, and no power can overcome. And when Nicodemus comes to put Jesus in the tomb, in the Gospel of John particularly, it says that he brought just a metric ton of spices to bind his body. And when you read it that way, you're like going, why did he bring so much spice to bind his body? Well, Jesus said, I'm going to rise from the dead. And yet there's a guy coming along and he's binding his body. The implication is that they don't want him to rise from the dead. Just like they don't want Samson to break out of his bonds. But he does. So there's these cool things that are happening. But you're right. When Samson at the end of his story is put between the two pillars of the temple, and his eyes are plucked out, and he's there in that state, which is interesting. The fact that his eyes are plucked out is an allusion again to Genesis 3, where it says where he took of the fruit, and it says the serpent says, your eyes will be opened, and you will know good and evil. So when Samson's at the end of his life and his eyes are plucked out, that's an implication that's, it's not necessarily a good thing to touch good and evil. And that his eyes, he's not seeing, he's blind. But when he trusts in the Lord again and says, Lord, let me have my strength back one more time, and he puts his trust in Yahweh, and he said, put my hands between the two pillars of this temple. Now all his enemies are there, and they're doing a thing. And so that he says that he's there, and he pushes on the temple, the pillars of the temple. He brings the whole place down, and he kills more people, and has a greater victory in his death than he ever had in anything in his life. So there's just this cool thing that says, yeah, even in the bad that Samson did, brought about a greater victory than what otherwise would have been. And there's some kind of resolution or restoration, or that basically God says, even in the evil, even in the bad, that God's bringing about a greater good that you wouldn't have otherwise had or known. And that's my story. Honestly, I feel like when this thing happened, I got the tumor, and I've been thinking about all these things, and particularly in the restoration. Now, just going back, and I don't know if I'm going too far, too long. You guys got to keep me wrangled, because having had my part of my brain removed, I tend to talk and go, I feel like I'm doing just fine. So please guide me. If I go off on a rail, you can say, hey, man, come back to this topic. I will go back to that topic. So
No, it's great. I mean, of course, there are questions that I have, but you inevitably make it to the answer of the question before I, work up the energy to ask it. So no, this is great. I mean, in a situation like yours that comes so suddenly, and you've had now a couple of months to be in it, to be in the situation, to explore something that is really valuable, that at least as Americans we so rarely get to sit with and really think about in some sort of realistic or tangible context, which is our own mortality. And what I'm experiencing here, listening to you, is a sort of clarity and a depth of exploration that people like Chris and I can do in sort of an academic way, or even in sort of a casual way, but it's all very abstract. So in the reality of your situation, I mean, we are getting a look through a window into a world that we've been told about, and every self-respecting, inward-looking person likes to think that they have pondered their own mortality in a way. However, it's a really valuable experience for me, and I'm sure for the listeners, for you to be laying out the last 2 months of introspection and reflection and theological scrutiny that comes from such a very real situation. So I'm finding this very valuable, and I appreciate this.
Well, good. This has been my project, I guess you say, since basically I started Logos Made Flesh, which it's coupled with something that happened. So let me just jump way back where I come from, just to quickly talk about my origin story. In 1991, I had a radical experience with God. I'm a Pentecostal by tradition, by birth. My family went to a Pentecostal church. In 1991, I had a radical experience where I received what our denomination calls the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and where I began to speak in tongues. And I explained it a little bit more in the other podcast. I won't go into it quite so much here, but it changed me, radically changed me. I knew that God was real, and it gave me this sense of his presence and his goodness, and I wanted nothing more than for everybody else to experience the love and power of God in their life, and wanted to share that with everyone. So that led me into going to back to school. I was 8th grader. I started prayer meeting at my school. I do all these things because I just wanted people to know and love God. And I got to preach to people, not preach to people, but share, because people saw that I was good. I love people, and I was able just to be me. But I really wanted to go to the ministry, really wanted to become a pastor. That was my desire from the beginning, was I just wanted to be basically where he was and to do ministry. I loved God and I loved people. So I go back, I'm 8th grader, I do all that. I'm in 9th grade, 10th grade. I think my 10th grade year, it was 1993, Super Bowl Sunday. I'd gone through several relationships back and forth, insignificant relationships, but they hurt nonetheless. You date somebody and they dump you, or you dump them, and it's just like, well, this is just kind of messy. It's just kind of gross. I was done with it. I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I said, I told God, Super Bowl Sunday, 1993, that I'm going to give you 2 years of my life. I'm going to not date anybody, and I'm going to put you first. So I meant it. And but it wasn't like it was at a church service or anything. I didn't have to sign a card saying true love waits or anything like that. It was my commitment to God, my own personal commitment to God. So I'd say probably 6 to 9 months later, I'm now a natural helper because I got voted in as a natural helper at my school. People know me. I'm good to people, and I just loved everyone. So I become a natural helper in helping the freshman class come in to the into the high school. So I'm a 10th grader helping the freshman class in. And in this group that I brought in, was helping out with, there was someone who caught my eye. I liked her almost immediately. She liked me. I didn't know much about her. She's Catholic. I'm not, obviously I'm Pentecostal evangelical, and I'm not even quite so sure where she stands with God, because Catholics are a mystery to me. But I'm interested. I like her, like her spirit, like who she is. And so we sit down and I tell her I got 2 years. I'm not looking for a relationship. She said, that's cool. And we would talk and just hang out for a bit. And I may meet her in the library afterward. I think we went to a dance together, had our picture taken together, whatever. I've gone into this before. I'm just trying to catch you guys up to speed. But one day she doesn't show up at the library when I'm waiting for her. And because I wasn't pursuing, I was very stoic. But she doesn't show, and I'm like, okay, she didn't show. I go outside and I look down the hallway, and she's flirting with, or another guy is flirting with her. And I'm not, because I'm being stoic and being made my vow. So she comes to me the next day, says, hey, I got to talk to you. I said, okay. She says, hey, I just want to let you know I really like you, but I also like this other guy. I said, well, that's okay. Go for the other guy. And then she walked away crying. And I let her go. And I never talked to her again. This is just in hindsight. I'm telling this story now because it becomes pertinent to the story that comes much later on. So this is why I'm telling this story. That became part of my story because what happened is that at the end of those 2 years, I started dating my wife, Tammy. And we dated for 4 years, and we had 4 beautiful kids. We have 4 beautiful kids. So it became part of my story. I gave God 2 years of my life, gave him my first and my best, and at the end of that time, God gave me the desires of my heart, which is my family. I have everything because I laid it down and gave it to him. So 20 years later, after that time, I'm now a jailer at the Clark County Jail in Vancouver, Washington, and sitting behind a tower, and over the course of, more than a decade, I'm a jailer and trying to become a pastor, wanting to become a pastor, and living in a rated R environment that's very different from church on Sunday. And slowly, over the course of time, for whatever reason, the walls built up around me to the fact that even though I became a better teacher, better preacher, I read the Bible, I knew it very well, the opportunities weren't coming. My wife and I, we camp for whatever to honor my wife's desire for security, and I like security too. She says I like comfort too. It's true, I do. I like her comfort because it makes me comforted. So this is kind of just who we are. And so I would go to a church and I would camp there waiting for an opportunity. I would do there, try to show myself to be a person of value, but I was reluctant to just jump into a place, to go blindly into a church like Chris is doing now. And not know the messiness of that church, because church is just not a 9-to-5 thing. You don't clock in, clock out. It's your life, and it's not just your life, it's your family's life. So you're not just a pastor, your family's kind of that too. You're kind of all on display. It's a different type of living. And a lot of people don't know that. Maybe they just think, hey, you did your 9 to 5. No, it's a way of life, and it's a way of life because my dad was in ministry, and I knew ministers, and it's a weight on your kids too. It's a weight on your wife. And they kind of have to bear up under that burden as well. And it's an agreement that you make, and you do it together. So I was reluctant to go to any place that I didn't know what might happen. So I'd go to a place, and I'd spend 5 years there and serving, showing my place to be a person of value, because hoping that they would see me of value or be able to hire me on. So now my family feels comfortable. I feel comfortable. You just transition to full-time ministry. That just seems to be the best way of doing it. And as I waited and waited and waited, those opportunities never came. Churches we went to either didn't have enough money or they had transition problems, and I would just work. I was working almost full-time jobs because I was volunteering outside my full-time job as a jailer, as a youth pastor here, just to try to pull up churches by their own bootstraps to try to get a place. Here, I'm valuable. Hire me. And yet it never came. And the more I waited in the jail, the more I was there, the jail would its spirit kind of saturated me. It saturated my stories. It saturated my humor. It's a little darker now. Chris, you were a volunteer firefighter. I mean, not a volunteer. You know that the experiences you had, they kind of, you got gallows humor. You see things a little bit weird and different than most people do, and it doesn't translate. Some people can't understand it, and so for whatever reason, it just always felt like, I mean, I did get opportunities to teach and to preach, but it felt like the doors were closed, and it was often humorous how the doors were closed. I mean, humorous now. I mean, it hurt then. But it didn't seem to be like any one person was closing the doors on me. It seemed like God himself was closing the doors, and the walls just kept getting higher. So the weight that I had on me was that I needed to become like my dad. My dad was a successful teen evangelist. He spoke to 3 million teens across the United States. I was always told when I got this radical conversion that you're going to do great things. My dad would say, you're going to do greater things than me. And I always looked up to him, and I wanted to do those great things. And I also wanted to be the family man that I needed to be to protect my wife and all those kind of things. So there's all these things I need to do in my life. And yet here I am stuck in this jail, and the walls are building up, and now I'm heading towards 40. So I'm 37 years old now in 2015, and I see 40's coming. I kept telling my wife, 40's coming. And to me, that was the thing. I got to write a book. My dad had written a book by the time he was 30, or he had a ghostwriter do it. And I was like, I got to write a book. I got to do something. And so I'm doing all these things to try to figure out what I need to do. And I just can't get out of the jail. And I pretty realized that, I just didn't know how to get out. At this time, 37 years old, and then in 2015, she walks in. The girl that I had not talked to, and the girl that I gave up to God in 2015, or not 2015, but 1993 or something like that. And she comes down and works beside me. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, I haven't seen anybody from school. Like, I've worked in this place. I live in our county's like 450,000 people. I work in the jail, which is a fairly large facility. It's a large facility in our county, but I've worked there for over a decade, and I don't see very many, even people who get arrested. I see some people I know from high school and stuff like that, but only vaguely knew from high school. But I've never seen anybody come and work next to me that I knew previously. It's just, it's a big place. I mean, and then this person that had some kind of significance in my life, like I literally laid her down and I got my family, comes and works beside me. Well, that was significant to me. And it bothered me. A couple of things bothered me. My wife told me the other night. What bothered me is that when she was coming, I was like, I don't feel impressive. I feel like while the kid that I was when I was 15 and had something going for him, now I'm a crusted over jailer, just here and existing, and I haven't done anything. And I felt kind of exposed that way when she came, because I was a stellar Christian that let her go, and here I am now heading towards 40, and just I haven't done anything. So she comes and sits down beside me, and we're working together. She tells me about her. I said, "What's been going on? How you been?" She says, "Yeah." She starts telling about it a little bit. She's like, me and my husband, we were youth pastors in every church we've attended. And I said, "Son of a." So here it is. I let her go. I let her go because, she's not the Christian. I didn't know her. She was a mystery, that kind of stuff. I didn't know where she stood with God, and I felt completely, and I had a vow, but I also, the question was she that person? Her parents weren't going to let her come to my church, that kind of stuff. But she shows up and actually is the Christian that I never thought her to be.
Mm.
So I was, what's that? Like, God? Well, what's up with that? Why are you poking me? I mean, I would suddenly realize it could have been different. Why am I sitting in the jail? Why are all these things here? I'm not trying to regret anything, but that seed of regret, it's hard. You can't. In a movie called Magnolia, there's a good movie called. It says that we may be through with the past, but the past ain't through with us. And that was kind of like, wow. And to describe it to you, and I described it to my wife. It's like later on, it was like I never dealt with it. I just put it out of my mind. But when she shows up, it's like I'm going through a breakup 20 years after the fact. Like, well, but now I'm married and I'm not. I'm just hurting. And everything was like a strike against. It was like a strike against everything that I had held on to, because I told everybody. I laid it down. God gave me what I wanted. I didn't go seeking after her. I didn't look her up on Facebook. I didn't go call her out. And suddenly God puts her right next to me and then says, hey, guess what? Look what you could have had. And I'm like, well, I was happy, content. I didn't need that. And it's not like she was bad or anything like that. And I'm just like, the fact of the ministry, the Christian, the thing which made me walk away. But I'm rejoicing in the fact I've got a great family. I'm not regretting my family, but at the same time, I am regretting sitting in the Clark County jail for so long and these walls building up around me. And I'm like, it could have been different. I don't know why. I don't know what the plan is. I just felt very confused. I'm like, why is this happening?
And when was this? What year was this?
This was 2016, 2014?
Okay, yeah, around there.
Yeah. So this is about the time I did start Logos Made Flesh, because this is what happened afterwards. I think at the end of it, she was a lift. So when she came in, I felt disconcerted, but she was a lift that said, okay, you got a fresh wind, get out of the jail, go to seminary. So I started seminary, got a job as an intern at a different church, left the church I was at because we were camping. I said, I'm done camping. I'm going to get that piece of paper. I'm going to do the things that I haven't done. So I started moving. I started working towards that because I felt the doors were opening. I felt a lift. I felt a wind. I was disconcerted, but I had gone to the Lord in prayer and I said, God, I don't know what to do with this. And I just remember him saying, you delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And I remember by saying, I have delighted in you, Lord. I put you first and you have given me the desires of my heart. And I preached that message to a bunch of youth. This is the funny thing, guys. I preached that message to a bunch of youth when I was asked to go speak. And because she'd come, I remembered what I gave and that I gave it to the Lord and that I could be comforted in the fact that, yes, this is my story. This is how it is. So I went and preached that message to them, told them that how she showed up and reminded me by this time when I gave her up and that God gave me my family. And I talked about my family and what a wonderful time my wife and I have. And we have a great relationship. And we are friends and we scare each other. And I told them all these funny stories about us. And then I told him, you can do the same thing too. You give your first to God and he will give to you. Delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. So I bring that message up. I recorded it, brought it home to my wife, put it in the thumb drive, let her listen to it. And she knew the message I was going to preach. She knew kind of what was going on a little bit. But she also knew that I was disconcerted when she came. Like didn't feel very impressive. I told her that kind of stuff. And then so she's listening to this message and the recording's going. And at the point it said, I like this person. I wanted this person. It shuts off. The recording shut off. And yet the recording, I know the recording was fully there, but for whatever reason that night, it shut off at that point with that ringing in my wife's ears. And I could see it setting in. She said, don't you make me jealous. And I said, well, babe, I didn't, that wasn't my intent. I'm like telling you this because I'm a very genuine, honest guy. But at the same time, she's starting to feel very vulnerable, very uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And there was other things that happened. There was a private message that was passed between me and this gal. The what had happened is that she just said, hey, what you up to? She sent a message to me and I sent it back to her. And I hadn't been able to talk to her because we only talked we're not going out to coffee. We're talking at work in passing, different shifts, and just in passing. So there wasn't a lot of time to catch up. So there's a lot of 20 years gap in there. I'd just be curious what's going on, get to know her, that kind of stuff. So she sends me a message. I send it back to her, and I tell her the last time I saw her, where I was, and so on. But because I was a little more exuberant in the exchange, and you can hear the other podcast, exuberant in this exchange, I didn't think it was. I didn't want my wife to see it, because there's some things you don't do. You don't turn your head to another woman when your wife is in the room. You may do it when she's not, but because you don't want to flaunt it, kind of thing. It's not that there's anything in it, but so I erased the message. But the message got saved on my computer in the fact that it had been erased. And my wife came to me a few days later and said, "Did you send a message and did you erase it?" And I said, "Yes, I did." I knew, and I'm like, that looks even worse. So I told her everything I said. It's not looking good. It's not looking good. And I told her everything I said. And now, because I'm under the spotlight and my tendency is just to confess, I start up-checking everything. Like everything I'm thinking, I'm just like, I'm giving you all over. If you want to know what I'm thinking, here's everything. I don't want you to doubt me. I want you to know who I am. I don't want anything between us, that kind of stuff. And it's too much. It's way too much. But my tendency is to do that, to confess, to I want to be me. Anyway, so I'm trying to reassure her by offering more confession, to say that, hey, there's nothing between you and me. I love you, and if I tell you I love you, I mean I love you, but I'm also all these other questions about my place, all these things, what am I supposed to do? And which just makes it said and harder. And it, I won't go into all the details, but it quickly became, this person became she who must not be named. My wife had a hurt in her which I could not touch. And the more I tried to touch it, to alleviate it, the more she held on to it, and the more it seemed to be strangling me. Because I felt in the hurt that she had, that I'd actually done the thing that she believed I'd done, and me being my place. We have, we all have parents, we all have families, and we have fathers or brothers or whatever who don't live up to their expectations or whatever. Well, in my situation, family situation, I had been always taught to kind of undo the sins of the fathers or whatever, that it was placed upon me to undo that thing and never do that thing. And here I suddenly found myself being in the place where I was that thing, and I was being declared to be that thing. And not because I'd done anything, but because there was hurt, because of other people's things that they had done. And now I was being held account. And it just, her hurt became strangling. But it wasn't her, it was her hurt, which was caused by someone else. But it also was caused by me, because I stumbled into it. And now I can't break free from it. And now I am that person that I never wanted to be. And it just couldn't be fine. It just couldn't be okay. And for me, for just not to be fine or okay meant that there was something there, and that I was now guilty of something which I never wanted to be. And I told her, I said, my wife, I said, you are making me that thing. I never wanted to be that thing. I was not that thing. But now I am that thing, because you're declaring it to be so in the hurt that you feel, and I can't touch, and I can't alleviate, and I can't change it. It's just going to always be this. It's just frozen. It's dead. It can't be undone. So now all of a sudden, tripped on this wire, which was a giant explosion in my life, which I thought was an open door. Now I'm getting free of all these things, and I'm moving free. Now it becomes, within a matter of months, all the dreams I have of getting out of the jail crumble beneath me. I walk away from the internship. I feel like at seminary everything hurts. I'm done lifting the world. I was like, I pushed on all these doors, and I thought the door was open. And now when the door is open, God shuts it in my face. He slams it in my face and throws me to the ground. He clips my wings, throws me to the ground, and breaks all my bones. And I'm like, what did I do? I just wanted to serve God. And now I'm here on the floor under the weight of all of this pain and hurt, where previously I'd been very happy, and I thought, fresh wind. I thought things were going to go very differently. I thought this lady would become friends with my wife, and that they would become family friends. Her husband's a great guy, and I had no intention of doing anything else. But now I'm like barred from her by my wife in her hurt. She wants me to have nothing to do with her, and I'm like, well, don't see it that way. So she leaves where I work. She goes somewhere else. So now she's gone, and now my wife's hurt, and now I'm hurt. And now I'm trying to do ministry. But at the same time, here's another thing is in doing what I've done because I'm so exuberant and love the Lord and I had so much faith, I believe that doubt, I never shied away from doubt. Doubt has always bothered me, but I felt that if I had faith, it wasn't to hide from doubt, but to embrace doubt. So if I have faith, if I can't deal with doubt, I'm a coward and I don't truly have faith. Now that's a very different perspective than most people have. But my tendency was to say, if I have faith, any doubt that comes my way, I shouldn't be afraid of. And I, in fact, should wrestle with it and be honest about it and try to come to terms with it. Because if I'm just hiding from doubt, I really don't have faith. I'm just pretending to believe. So in my tendency to do that, I've done it since I was in high school, which like evolution versus creation, it bothered me. Evolution bothered me. On a fundamental level, it bothered me in the creation story, reconciling Jesus to how old the earth was. All that kind of stuff bothered me. But I didn't just put it out of my mind. I couldn't just put it out of my mind. I don't, and a friend of mine I was reminded of this the other day. He says, you don't compartmentalize very well. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't compartmentalize anything. I'm a very holistic thinker. And if anything rubs against any part of it, I have to reconcile it with everything. And this leads me to go, I can't let doubt at a distance. It has to be welcomed in as a friend almost, as truth itself, even if it doesn't make me happy, even if it doesn't give me joy. It is something that I have to figure out. And so in this place where I have essentially, and this is what knowledge is, and Ecclesiastes kind of gives you the same impression, knowledge is a burden. Once you pick it up, you can never put it back down. Knowledge isn't necessarily a friend. It's a good thing in the end. Wisdom is a good thing in the end, but it doesn't necessarily make you happy. So you pick it up, you read the article, you do the thing, and yet it messes with your faith. And while you wanted to have a good perspective about the world, wanted to love the world, and now you get this thing and you're going, boy, I didn't see it the same way now. Well, I did that. I wrestled with my doubt to take on these things and really had some great answers. Sometimes I'd have good answers, sometimes I wouldn't. But it was always a weight. I was always carrying everybody's, trying to answer everyone else's problem, evil, all these kind of things. And so now I'm broken and on the ground. And I'm like, now I have no answers. And now I have no joy, no faith. And all that weight just was on me. And I'm like, why did I pick up anything to begin with? I mean, the reason I picked up these things was because I love the Lord. The reason I picked these up things because I wanted to help others. And now I'm broken and have no answers. And I'm like, why did I even begin with? So at that point, I'm like, I just gave up. I died. I said, I'm never going to be a pastor. I'm never going to be anything more than a jailer. And I accepted the fact that I was simply going to be a jailer for the rest of my life. And so that's why I walked away from everything, crumbled beneath me. And I started saying to people, I don't know if I believe in God. I'm not here to lift him up. I'm not here to, to declare the brand or to do the marketing speech. I will be as honest with you as I can. And I had some honest conversation with people. People started opening to me about God, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I know a lot, but I don't get it. That's when I resigned myself again about 2015 or so to the fact that I was never going to get out, or 2016. I started reading Ecclesiastes, and I'd started Logos Made Flesh with the idea of doing Bible commentary, kind of like the Bible Project. I had some ideas and stuff like that. And that was towards the end of 2015 when she was there. I thought that was one of the things I was thinking about doing. I'm going to go and do a studio. I'm going to start doing that stuff. I'm a pretty good Bible teacher. Nobody wants to hear me. No one's asking me to teach, but I can do something on YouTube. Maybe shows people how to read the Bible. But as the year progressed, I was like, nobody cares about the Bible. Nobody cares about, because nobody reads it, for one thing. Nobody reads it. So to open people's eyes when they haven't actually read it, you say they like the Bible, but they don't read it. So you go and you try to open their eyes, and they have no idea what you're talking about, whether it's good or bad or anything like that. So I said, you know what people like, and they all know. They know better than the Bible. Everyone likes movies. They don't understand movies either. So if I just kind of take what I do, turn it to movies, because it's essentially the same thing. Interpretation is interpretation. And so I just start wrestling with the messages in movies rather than just telling people what the Bible says. Then I'll get more. There was really, in YouTube at this time, there's a huge push to do movie interpretation. I'm like, I can do that. I mean, in fact, I think I could do, some of the ones I was watching, they were pretty good, but I was like, I could even do better than that. So
we agree.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's when I started wrestling with No Country for Old Men. And I had watched The Seventh Seal. This is an idea that was percolating back in. I'd watched The Seventh Seal a couple years previous to that, and it's about the silence of God. Because in The Seventh Seal in Revelation, it says that there was a seal that was broken and there was silence in heaven for about a half hour. So it's a disconcerting film for anyone to watch, but it's about faith and doubt. It's about a knight returning to the Holy Land after being in crusade, and he's met by the figure of death, and he's going to die. And he says, wait. And death says, what? He goes, well, do you play chess? So they play a game of chess. Death allows him to live as long as they're playing this game of chess. And the knight is looking for meaning and certainty. He wants to know that his life wasn't meaningless. He wants to know that what he did valued, and that there actually is with certainty, there is a God, because all he gets from God is silence, because he's not hearing God speak. So the film wrestles with some pretty, it's a good film. It's not a pleasant film. Like No Country for Old Men, it's something that you have to sit with and think about. And I think the dark things are good to think about. So I saw when I saw No Country for Old Men, I saw Chigurh. This was a thought that just percolated in my head for one day. It was like, well, that's just the Seventh Seal. Chigurh is the figure of death. He's got instead of a sai, which is traditional for death to have, he has a cattle gun, which he walks up to people and he says, hold still, and puts it up to their head and kills them. And he also has this strange haircut. He's kind of this, this embodiment of death. And what he does is he offers people a coin toss. His only reprieve is a coin toss, and you have to call it. But some people in the film don't want to call it. But that too is an instant loss. You have to play because he's offering you something. It's his only grace he's offering is the coin toss. You have to call it. And in thinking about The Seventh Seal and thinking about No Country for Old Men and thinking about this and reading Ecclesiastes, I realized that for whatever reason, I was like, well, that's just Pascal's wager. But it's not Pascal's wager in the way that we typically think about Pascal's wager, which is typically argued against because Pascal kind of couched it like, well, there's either heaven or hell kind of thing. There's eternal this or eternal that. And people will come back and say, well, that's just a false binary because there could be heaven and there could be Valhalla. There could be heaven and there could be something else. That basically there's so many different options that the options are so plentiful and so widely diverse that there is no choice between this or that. And therefore, Pascal wager doesn't work. That's the argument against Pascal's wager. But what I saw was it's not a argument about whether heaven or hell exist, whether God or Jesus or Christianity or his Buddha or whatever is not. That's not the argument. Even Pascal, I think, wasn't quite arguing that much about that. What it is an existential argument about what you're going to do if you know you're going to die. Because there's only two bets that can be made, whether or not this life matters or it doesn't. Whether there's something beyond this life or there isn't. That's the bet. What am I going to do right now knowing I'm going to die? And in fact, Pascal, if you read his original argument, which most people don't, they hear it couched in a different phraseology that we typically use in evangelism and stuff like that. What he couches it as is a coin toss. And he couches it as in the terms of uncertainty. You don't know. You don't know if there's a God, but you're forced to bet. What bet will you make? And he says, based upon the eternal consequences of that decision, the best bet is to bet on God. And I think he makes a pretty good argument because that's essentially what No Country for Old Men is arguing through the fact is that if you meet death, and he says, call the coin toss, he's giving you a grace. Now, he's not guaranteeing that you're going to win. You may lose. Here's the flip of the coin. You call heads, it might be tails, and you might die. But then to refuse death and say, no, I'm not going to bet. Well, that's the stupidest option you can make. There's no glory in that. You're just simply giving up the only thing that you have. So think of it this way. I mean, we think of it like we're going to get more existence by holding on to existence. Well, that's just dumb. You don't get more existence by holding on to existence. You have existence. That's the only gift that you have. So live it, enjoy it, embrace it, whether good or bad. That's the only gift that you're given. So don't say, well, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to call it. I'm not going to take what I've been given because there might be more. Well, you haven't been guaranteed more. You've been given a gift, and you might as well just take that and enjoy what you've been given because there might not be any more. In fact, you just have to assume there isn't more. What you've been given is everything, and you need to embrace that wholly and fully. Otherwise, it's going to be a loss. So, reading Ecclesiastes, in the years that came, I mean, I saw Ecclesiastes. It's shot through full of in the Coen brothers film. They're Jews. When I say they're Jews, I don't mean. I mean that's their ethnicity, that's their religion, that's the culture in which they were raised. So they see the Bible. I think the Coens are very good at understanding the Bible. They just have a different sort of humor. I think in Buster Scruggs plays the character of the Coens, and he's called misanthropic. He's called a misanthrope, which the Coens have been called misanthropic, meaning that they don't like people, they don't like humanity, because they're so dark in their humor and their irony and everything. And yet, like in No Country for Old Men, they are the best doctors that you could possibly have because they cut out all the bullshit. That they just don't make life that pleasant. They just go, let's laugh at what life is, just like Ecclesiastes. Let's look at it in the face and just know what life is and not pretend that it's something else. And have a fairy tale about what it could be or what it might be. But let's just be very honest in who we are as people, how we treat people, all those kind of things. And that's what No Country for Old Men is. It is a very life-affirming story. I watched it just recently, not my video, but I went and just rewatched the movie, and I'm going, it's a doctor who sits down and says, I have to cut off your arm. And you say, well, I don't want to lose my arm. Well, if I don't cut your arm off, you're going to die. And they're like, well, I don't want to lose my arm. Well, I'm here to help. It's not pleasant, but they're here to help. And so that's what No Country for Old Men did for me. And just like Ecclesiastes, you look death in the eye and you say, what are you going to do? You're dying and you're going to die. What are you going to do? It's not the good news you wanted, but you got to live with it. So I read Ecclesiastes 11:6 in my years to come. I got a tattoo, and it says, sow your seed in the morning, and in the evening withhold not your hand. For you do not know, again, that uncertainty, for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Now, Ecclesiastes isn't saying, in fact, it's very nonchalant about, we don't know what God thinks at all. But it does make a very strong claim that basically the only seed that doesn't grow is the seed that isn't sown. Mm. So in essence, if you're in a state of death and you don't have anything else, what people are looking for is they want certainty in something else. They want to know that there's a God. They want to know that everything's going to be made right. They want to know something. And yet you do know something. You do know something. And the one thing you do know is the seed that isn't sown is the one that will not grow. So sow your seed. Do it now. Enjoy life. Embrace it. Take what you have now. Don't look for some other option, but embrace the joy, the sorrow, the hurt, the pain. Take it up because that is the gift and the only gift that you've been given. And you're going to find in the end that that's far more profound than anything else. Waiting for something else, waiting for the $1 million, waiting for the lottery to take away your pains, waiting for anything else. You say, God, you gave me a gift, and I'm not going to take it for granted. That this life, even the pain, even the muck, even everything, I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to do the best I can with it, which is to say that you've given me something, and I'm going to give it back in whatever way I can.
Yeah. It feels like one of the abstractions connected to what you're talking about for a lot of people is that the length of time that they have is such a mystery. I'm just coming to the point in my life. I just turned 30 a couple of years ago, and it's just now occurring to me that, this isn't going to be forever. I quite literally, when thinking about life plans, when thinking about, accomplishments that I want to accomplish, when thinking about this sort of thing, I literally, and I don't think I would have admitted it before I turned 30, but I think I was literally expecting that it wasn't going to end and that I had plenty of time and that, I'm in my 20s, man. Like, I can do it. I got my whole life ahead of me, which on one hand is sort of like optimistically true. Plenty of time, I'm not necessarily at the end of anything, but there was something about that 30th birthday that I was like, oh no, I am quickly running out of time.
Yeah.
And you are faced with an even more real timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, I want to, again, optimistically put it out there that there have been miracles and doctors have been wrong and things like this. And so we're keeping all that in mind. But you're in this very special place. And I hope that doesn't come across wrong or cold or whatever.
No.
But there is something very special about having a timer
Yeah.
running.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
What is that like, and what sort of what actions, what do you want to do? What does life look like for you? What are the plans or lack of plans in the next year and a half or so?
It does kind of remind me of the one country song before you give your real serious answer to the question. But
okay.
I went skydiving.
Yep.
Went Rocky Mountain. I'm not doing any more of it.
I know.
The one.
I was going to let you just go as far as you could with that, Chris.
My son, after he found me, he was terminal. He played that song because we'd been listening to it before. He loves that country song, and so when he found he was terminal, he actually started playing that song, which I thought it was cool that he was doing it. But what I did think was, this is what I thought was very. I went skydiving. I went Rocky Mountain High. Whatever. I thought I wanted to go skydiving a couple years ago, because I wanted to feel alive when I felt like I was hurting and dead, and I just wanted to wake up out of it. Yeah. But as soon as I found I was a terminal, I was like, I don't want to go skydiving. Skydiving is for the living who feel like they're dead. I'm dying. I don't need to go skydiving. I'm actually living it right now. Like, This is kind of skydiving. So, it's kind of invokes the spirit of adventure and stuff like that. But I'm like, I'm already on that adventure now. So I don't need to do that in order to feel that. I'm feeling it right now. Anyway, just a kind of an odd thing that, just a weird twist on that song that I thought was kind of interesting. So when I get this idea that I'm terminal, you got 15 months to live, I'm sitting there with a smile on my face. I mean, not so much. My wife very disconcerted. She's crying and stuff like that. But I'm strangely comforted, strangely feeling like, wait, if I went through some of the hellish things in my life over the past 6 years, fighting and not knowing and having all these doubts and questions and feeling broken and down and feeling like God was against me and I'm fighting against him and basically calling him out on his promises, saying, is this what it is? And then all of a sudden to find in an instant, in the worst news that could possibly come, that you're going to die and die very soon. And then know in that news just how good God has been to me over the last 6 years, preparing me, treating me as if, teaching me that you're terminal already. Your time is short. Now live it to the full. So I'm thinking of all these stories, all the videos I've done, everything. And I'm going, wait, God, when I didn't think you were good, you were actually my best friend. And what the comfort I had was, I know if God can be that good to me and that, he's going to go on being good to my kids 500 years from now. And when I lay my head down, I have complete trust and confidence that I'm going, man, if God works like that, which I didn't see before, experientially. I mean, everyone says Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good. Gets a little trite, get it on a card. People told me that all the time. I'm just like, hey, thanks. Why don't you just take the weight off for a while? But experientially, and what I'm telling you now, the strange thing is how this thing resolved. I felt very comforted. And I'm very comforted with my family. I mean, there's stuff I'm like, I worried about the other day about, I'm going to be gone, and the memory of me and my kids is going to deteriorate over 50 years, 30 years. I'm never going to know my grandkids. They're never going to see me. And it'll be the story. It'll just be this person. But at the same time, I'm like, and all the Logos made flesh and all the story I'm telling now in this gift that I've been given, they will remember me. I have a name. And because God put me through this stuff, I have a story to tell. I have something here that I did not have before. So people keep saying, you might be healed, man. I said, you know what? I may be healed. I believe in God who could heal me tomorrow because I've seen the miracle hand work in this whole thing. I'm like, absolutely he could. He could do something as fantastic as that too. But here's the thing. I'm like going, if I die 50 years from now, I want to die like this. With this comfort. With this confidence. Because I don't know if I'll have it 50 years from now. So the choice, and again, it may be there 50 years from now. Maybe God's going to work the same way. But I know right now I'm comforted. And while I don't want to die, no one does. But at the same time, I feel strangely comforted and feel like I can trust that I'm already there experiencing, well done, thou good and faithful servant. I feel God's blessing upon me and saying, I put you through hell, but I did it for a reason. I did it to open your eyes, and I did it to comfort you. It was for your good. All of this was for your good, and I've been blessed because of it. So I don't see it as a curse. I embraced everything. I see it as something that he gave, and I'm very thankful for. Logos Made Flesh came out of it. The people that I've talked to, I ended up surpassing my dad and all this stuff in terms of how many people I've reached and touched. I mean, it wouldn't have happened otherwise. If I just become a pastor, all this stuff would not have happened. If he just given me, the other day on Facebook, I wrote, the greatest gift of God ever gave me was not giving me what I wanted. And it was in the hurt of not having what I wanted that I found him more present and active than I've ever found him before. Last month, so just before I did Ravel, about the time I was doing Ravel, and it's about the time I'm getting fired again, it was about the time that we were doing the first podcast here. I'm listening to this new album, Elevation Church Worship. They're in, I think, North or South Carolina or whatever. They did The Blessing. I don't know if you heard the song The Blessing. But they had a new album out called The Old Church Basement. And I started listening to it and taking my kids to school. And it had these songs. And the theme of the album is the idea of the old idea of waiting in worship, which we don't typically do much in modern America with cell phones and everybody's rushing, it seems to have died. Sunday night services seem to have died 20 years ago. Sunday schools aren't quite as full as they used to be because everyone's busy. You got soccer on Sunday, you got everything else. I don't know how it is in the Bible Belt, down there in Florida or anything like that. But up here, it's a busy world. And we're all busy. And then this album, The Old Church Basement, it is a call to wait again. It's a call. In fact, the cover of the album is the overhead projector, the old overhead projector that used to put the words on the screen, right? And yeah. It is lit up with some smoke and light, and it looks as if it is the Holy of Holies, the Shekinah glory, like it is the reflection of where God's presence is. I mean, it's just a cool image. I just love the image because I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea that old projector that used to put the words on the screen was a place where we used to encounter God. And we did it in the waiting. We did it in the worship. We did it in the praying together and the prayer meetings that would go on for a while. The things we just don't do anymore. And in this album, there's a song called "Come Again," and as I've been working on Castaway. Castaway is a story about a man who's been put by God in a place, and we'll go through all the evidence in my videos that I'm going to do, but it's really God that puts Chuck on the island, and he's like a Job. God says, you're going to sit there, you're going to wait, and Chuck doesn't know why, but Chuck is in pain, Chuck is hurt, Chuck is lonely, God's not speaking to him, Chuck's not speaking to God, and yet he's made to wait there and sit in it. And the film is actually saying that Chuck is an idolater, and his eyes are closed, like all idolatry does. If you read the Bible, Psalms 115, Jeremiah, basically idolatry leads to blindness, it leads to deafness. You become what you worship. And Chuck is obsessed with technology, he's obsessed with cell phones, and a world that's very busy, and he's become blind to God. And in essence, it is the death of God. God isn't there. He can't see God. God is not working. God is not active. God is not present. Why? Well, the world's going as it is. Why would you need God? You fast, space, you go to the hospital, you do all this stuff, but you miss out on something. You can't see God not because he's not there, but because you're busy and you're blind. You're not taking the time, and some things you can only see by means of time. And if you can't take the time, you're never going to see. So what happens is that in the film is suggesting that Chuck is thrown or cast away, chucked onto the island in this pain of the silence and the deafness. You learn to live and you learn to sit there. Not for punishment per se, but so that God might open his eyes by means of time. And that's what happens in the end. Chuck learns to see God, and he comes to see God in the end. In fact, the last moment of the film where he smiles, he's halfway smile, is the smile of Wilson. I guess I won't go into the whole meaning of that, but the fact is that he's now endued with the power or the fire of God in that moment when he sees the hand of God has worked throughout the film. Now he's made anew in God's image as he sees God's hand has worked through the whole entire film. It's hard to get that, hard to say that, because you get to the end and you're like, just like you, Chris, you said, I just didn't know what to do with Castaway. It's not that great of a movie.
Here we go again.
But it's about the death of God. It actually is about, because if you look at Stevens, what's his first name? I can't remember. Wallace Stevens' poetry is about the death of God. And since that's where we began, was about the death of God, and we began this conversation talking about that, I thought I'd bring that in full circle. In No Country for Old Men, at the very end of the film, Tom Bell says something that I think is very profound. He says, when I was younger, I used to think that God would come into my life, and he didn't. Or he said, when I was younger, I used to think that God would come into my life when I go older, and he didn't. And the reason he doesn't, now that's disconcerting when you hear it. It's a very negative thing about, well, God doesn't show up. God isn't there. He's not present. He's not active. And it seems to be that's the case. It's not very nihilistic film. But what the film is actually saying, and I would think what Castaway is actually saying, is that God is not absent. None of these films are saying that God is absent or gone or that he's dead. They're saying we're dead. And the reason God is dead is because we are dead. So Tom Bell says he waited for God to come, but God never showed. And what the film is saying is, you didn't move. Because when you move, God moves in you. And he's not going to sit there and make you move. At the very beginning, when Chigurh comes along with his cattle gun, and he puts it up to the guy's head, he parks. He's a police officer. And this guy pulls off the side of the road, and this strange guy who's got a black getup walks up to him with a cattle gun and says, "Hold still," and he puts the cattle gun right up to the guy's forehead, and he kills the guy because the guy holds still. And everyone who watches that goes, "That guy was really stupid. He just held still." The very next scene you see is Llewellyn Moss with a rifle aimed at a bunch of antelope who are standing below, and he says the exact same thing: "Hold still." And then he fires. The point of the film is that, and again, this is the bet, if you just sit there and wait, and if you just hold still and not embrace life, if you just sit there and take it as it comes, you are in fact dead already, and you're going to die. But the fact is that God is saying, if you embrace life, if you do the thing, like if you go out and get up and sow your seed in the morning and the evening withhold not your hand, that's where you find God. He shows up when you start to live. And you find in the giving, you find in the sowing, because it says you do not know which will be good, this or that, or whether both alike, or whether both will be good. And what you find is that God is good once you give. Once you lay down life, once you let it go, once you stop holding on to existence and wanting something more, trying to get something more, trying to suck more out of it, through technology, through another adventure, through whatever, but you just embrace life for what it is and you give in that. That's when God shows up and you find that he is not dead. Why? Because you are no longer dead. When you stop worshiping idols, the false pretenses of your imagination of what you think God would do. Psalms 115 is a fantastic chapter. It says basically, why do the nations around us say, "Where is your God? Where is your God?" Why do they say that? Well, Israelites don't have any idols. Don't have any idols. And they said they don't understand. The writer says they don't understand. Our God is in heaven, and he does whatever he wants. And he says their gods are blind, deaf, they can't clear their throats, they're wooden statues, they're nothing. They're basically marionette puppets. In essence, they do whatever they want. Our God does whatever he wants, but they're just puppets. And he says those who make them will become like them, and so will all who trust in them. Meaning that if you worship an idol, you'll become dead like an idol, and you'll cease to live. So there's a reflexive aspect of worship that we need to see. If you worship and reach out to the living God and expect him to be life-giving, in fact, accept the fact that he could be good in the evil that he does, or the evil of the world that you perceive, but you embrace that fully, embrace the life that he has given, you will find him more alive and more real than you ever thought it would be. And so to, in essence, resurrect God, you'd say, if God is in fact dead, is for you to actually to stop being dead yourself and worship the one who's true and living and find yourself alive again. I don't know. I think that these films, Castaway particularly, which is about idolatry, you will see it in Wilson and everything like that, and No Country for Old Men, which is equally about whether God's going to show up or not, but the idea of taking the bet and finding in that life, and in that life, God. Because that's when he shows up. If you move, he'll move in you. But you sit there, and he'll sit there too. Because he's given you existence, and you don't get more existence by ignoring the gift that he's given. You embrace existence, you live the existence, you love the existence, and you honor the gift that he's given, and you're going to find him more present and active than you ever felt him before.
Wow. That's
sounds like a man who's found a new vision for what the rest of life is like.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that kind of brings the Death of God episode, the idea that you've been doing it to a little bit of a close. I mean, hopefully some kind of resolution or.
No, that's great. That's great. I mean, we told the people we are going to be doing addendums to the Death of God series, and this is definitely like has been a theme throughout the conversation here. This really brings it around to a very, not just interesting or compelling conclusion, but also something very real and unique perspective coming from a guy in your situation.
Definitely.
And I find that very valuable, and it's something that everybody can take and apply into their own, not just their own life in sort of like a, I don't know, passive type of way, but I mean, it's not often you get to experience perspectives like yours, which does bring me back to one of my questions earlier on, which is, us knowing and accepting that God can do whatever he wants in the next 15 months.
Yeah.
But what are you planning on doing for the next 15 months?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to finish Castaway. I'm working on that. Got my brother-in-law involved. He's an editor down in LA. So that's on the, another thing I'm going to do here pretty quick. I'm going to Scottsbluff, Nebraska this week. My funny story with my son. I was asked if I wanted to go anywhere in the world. I was given a plane ticket to go to any exotic place and wonderful beach or whatever that I wanted to go. And my son and I have a story of our last vacation where there was this not fallout. He prevented me from getting to the top of this rock cliff in Scottsbluff, Arizona, Nebraska on our way back. And so when I got my terminal condition, he said, "Well, Dad, looks like we got to go to Scottsbluff." So, and it was for him to alleviate the fact that if I do pass away, he doesn't win me the reason that I never got to the top. So when my friend asked me this question, he said, where do you want to go? I said, well, I want to go to Scottsbluff, Nebraska. So he said, well, that's easy. So we're heading out there this week, and we're going to ride some horses. So it's basically what I see in the future is I see speaking. If there's an open door, I'd love to share. I'd love to teach. I got a lot to share. Obviously, you guys have heard what I've shared. I still have videos and movie ideas. I don't know if I can get to it all. They're going to start burning my brain in about 2 weeks. They're going to start, and I'll have brain fog. I might not be the same person afterwards because it's going to be radiation. So some of my cognitive abilities will start to become clouded. So while I still have time, just love my family, speak as much as I can, share as much as I can, just enjoy the life that He's given and be very thankful. And I just want to say thank you guys, truly, and thankful for you and the opportunity you've given me, and to all for allowing me to share. I've been very blessed in this life.
Well, we've been blessed by you too, man. This has been really incredible. Not only your previous episode, but when you listen to a podcast or record a podcast with a guest, you really are, you try to be present in the topic and the situation that you're speaking about. But this is a very interesting revelation, I think, to know that there's so much going on within a person in the background. And anything can happen immediately following having the opportunity to sit and speak with somebody. So this has really been a real treasure, man, and I value our friendship very much.
Yes, and you are a fantastic podcaster. I'm going to say the quality of your podcast, what you can put together, Basil, is amazing. With you and Chris together, with you and Chris together,
the best in the biz.
Yeah, the banter between you guys is great. Like you said, you got those comments that said the banter between you guys is great. It's just... I think you guys are going to do well, and I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you.
Amen. Well, as you continue through being present and living your life and experiencing God and the world and everything over the next 15 months, we'll be keeping you in prayer, and we're always excited to talk to you again.
Yeah.
If you have something else come up that we need to talk about, and we'll be eagerly awaiting updates. And yes, you've got some rough medical procedures ahead, but from what I hear now, it sounds like you're one of those guys who is going to handle it with the aggression and grace that it deserves.
That's right. I'm a fighter. So I'm going to embrace it. Yeah.
Amen.
Oh, if you guys want to hear some funny jail stories, I can tell you some gross and funny jail stories. So if you guys ever want to just tell stories, I'd love to tell stories too.
Hey, maybe we should do a jail episode.
Oh, that'd be great.
I mean, people are always going to jail in the Bible. We could find some theology there.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you again. And remember, everybody, you can check out the Logos Made Flesh YouTube channel. And even given current circumstances, it sounds like there is new content being worked on.
Yes.
And if you're interested in movies and cinema and the different ideas being expressed and narrated beneath the surface, Logos Made Flesh YouTube, that is the place to go. Go check it out.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Chris, any last words?
Nope. Just want to say thank you for your friendship, Matt. Thank you for the contribution you've made here on this show and to the world at large. Have been really, really blessed just by your perspective here. And 15 months is kind of a long time in order for us to have some more time here on the show, and I'm sure that opportunity will afford itself. So yes, just to echo what Basil has already said, we will be praying for you. I know that we have a lot of prayer warriors in the audience out there, and they will be lifting you up. And I'm still looking forward to the day that you come back on and say, showed up at the doctor today and they said everything's ship shape. So I'm holding out for that still, my friend.
I was prayed over today at a prayer meeting today, and that was special. I was anointed with oil, so it was good. It was good.
Praise the Lord. And as I reminded you personally, there have been these diagnoses, famously Matt Chandler in the past, who has had this, and to whatever the doctors thought, the great physician had something else to say about it. So we do appreciate your time, and you're a true friend of the show here, and we will be looking forward to the next opportunity that we have to chat.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity, guys. Again, thank you.
Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to Ravel. To learn more about who we are, what we believe, or how to support this ministry, visit our website at ravelpodcast.com. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, or to let us know how we're doing. Email us at contact@ravelpodcast.com. This project is made possible by the prayers and generosity of listeners just like you.